If you watched our video on cheap sewing tools under $20, we showed you some really great pressing tools that are super helpful. We got a lot of questions about how exactly to use them. So in this video, Haley's going to show you how to use all our favorite pressing tools. And stay until the end to see why a paper product that you probably already have at home could revolutionize the way you sew and press hems. All right, I'll hand it over to Haley.
Anybody that knows me knows that I am obsessed with pressing. And because of my obsession, I have a lot of pressing tools, and I want to show you those today and how to use all of them. Let's start with one of the most important press tools, and this is a good one because you probably already have it, and that is a press cloth. A press cloth is used as a barrier between your project, your beautiful project, and your iron. It protects your fabric. And you can also use it as a barrier between the ironing board and your project. I like to use this when I am pressing something delicate that I don't want to scorch. Silk is a good example of this. Another place that I always use a press cloth is when I am pressing interfacing and applying interfacing to anything, because I don't want that adhesive on my ironing board and I don't want it on my iron. So what can you use for a press cloth? Most commonly, you'll see muslin fabric used for a press cloth. Here you can see our very well-loved press cloth. As you can see, it has all sorts of scorch marks on it, and that's a good thing because that has protected our fabric from getting those same marks. So this is going to be your all-purpose press cloth, but you can get a little special with it as well. Here we have a silk organza press cloth that we use sometimes. This is really great when you're doing something kind of fiddly and you want to see what's going on underneath that press cloth, because muslin, it's opaque, you can't really see what you're doing. So this is really great for that. It's also good for lower heat settings because silk doesn't necessarily love a super high heat. And a little hot bonus tip, if you have a scrap of wool lying around, this can also be a really great press cloth to lay on top of your ironing board. This is because wool tends to be a little bit spongy, and it can help you to avoid those indent marks from your seam allowance when you're pressing. Next up, we have a tailor's ham. A tailor's ham is a really tightly stuffed little pillow that is filled with sawdust. And you can buy them pre-made. You can also find tutorials for making your own. But what you use this for is to help you press any areas where you have curves. So this is really useful for when you're pressing darts. So you're not getting a really pointy dart effect. Instead, you can use the heat and steam of the iron and your precious tailor's ham to kind of mold around the curves. It's also great for places like hip curves, where you don't necessarily want to use the flat ironing board. All you need to do is place your tailor's ham underneath the area you want to press. In this case, I'm pressing some darts, and then use your iron to help you mold that curve. You can also place your ham in areas like sleeve caps to help you get into that tighter little curve there. A fun little fact about your tailor's ham is that it has two sides. We have this woolly side and then this side that is made from a cotton canvas. The cotton canvas side is the side that you'll want to use on higher temperature fabrics, think cotton and linen. And the woolly side you can use when you're using fabrics that like a little lower heat setting like wool or silk. Next up, we have a seam roll. So a seam roll is basically just like a tailor's ham. It's a little pillow, it's stuffed with sawdust, but instead of having the ham-like shape of a tailor's ham, it is more of a long, skinny roll. And this is really helpful when we're trying to get into a little bit tighter areas that the ham cannot get into. For instance, a sleeve cuff can be a really great place to use your seam roll. All you need to do is place your seam roll wherever you'd like to press. Then you can give your placket or your cuff a nice little press, and you don't have to worry about crushing the rest of your garment because your seam roll is providing your pressing surface for you. Next up, we have the clapper. A clapper is a wooden block that you use to kind of clap your seams. So how does one clap their seams, and why would one do that? So lots of times an iron needs a little bit of help. Let's say that I have pressed the hem on my denim jacket, but we've had those situations, or maybe you haven't, but I definitely have, where you press something and then it just like flips right back up. That is where a clapper comes in handy. What you want to do is press your seam with as much heat and steam as it'll tolerate, and then you place your clapper on top and apply a little light pressure, and the clapper is going to help trap that heat and that steam and set that area into place, whether that is a hem or a crease that you are trying to set. I think of it as if you've ever curled your hair with a curling iron and then put it into some pins to help hold it. That is exactly what we're doing here, but on fabric. And you can see that by doing that, I've gotten a much more crisp hem than I would have been able to get otherwise. Here I used it on denim, and that is a great example of the kinds of places you're gonna wanna use a clapper. Thicker, heavier weight fabrics really benefit from the use of this tool. Next up, we have a sleeve board. A sleeve board is kind of like a little miniature ironing board that we use specifically for things like sleeves or pant legs. And this is because of its narrow shape. We can simply slide our sleeves onto it, and it gives us access to seams that we wouldn't have access to normally on an ironing board, and gives us a really good pressing surface for those seams. This is also a really great tool if you make kids clothes, or I don't know, even animal clothes, because of all of the teeny tiny little pieces that you need to press in those garments. Our next tool is something that I've seen go by a couple different names, but I've always called it a tailor's point and clapper. And it might look a little bit confusing, and that's because this tool actually serves multiple purposes. So we have our blunt end over here, and this is a clapper, just like the one that we saw earlier. You can use this edge to clap your seams. Then right here, we have the tailor's point, and this is used to press points. This is great when you're pressing things like collars or cuffs, and you really want to get a nice crisp point, and you want the help of your iron to do that. To use the tailor's point end, you are going to slide your garment or your collar, the area that you'd like to press, right on top of this little point here, and give it a little press, and you can get in with the point of your iron and really do a lot of precision pressing there. Next up, we have a seam roll. So a seam roll is a tool that we use in place of an iron. So kind of a pressing tool, kind of not. And how you use it is you simply roll it along any seam that you would like to press, but you can't use an iron on. This is really great for things that don't tolerate any heat at all, like this faux leather that I have here. You can also use it for leather, vinyl fabrics, waterproof fabrics, waxed canvas. Seam roll is really great for all of those. You could also use a seam roll as a way to finger press things before you press them. So you can have this at your sewing machine, and it can help you kind of flatten out those seams before you bring them over to your ironing board to iron them. And here are two final tools that are not strictly pressing related, and you may already have them in your home. First up, we have a mallet. I have to say that this is one of my favorite pressing tools. So the places that we would use a mallet would be anywhere where you're working with really thick, heavy fabric that just will not stay in place. So for instance, if I was hemming some denim and I was having a point, maybe particularly at the side seam where it was just not being obedient, I would give it a little tap, tap, tap to help make the fabric lay in place a little bit better. It also helps to compress the fibers and give you a little bit easier spot to sew over when you're dealing with it at your sewing machine as well. And then next up, we have some cardstock. So maybe you don't have cardstock laying around, but you could totally use a cut up cereal box or something like that. Just be mindful of any paint that might be on it and give it a little test before you press. What I like to use this for is to create templates for pressing. So for instance, if I had a pocket that had a little curve to it, I could cut the template out of my cardstock and use it to help press everything neatly into that shape that I'm trying to get. You could also use it to help you create hem templates. So you can make some marks on your cardstock, fold everything in place, and then use it as a template while you're pressing. Okay, I think I got it all. Did I miss any pressing tools, or do you have any really hot pressing tips? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you next time. Happy pressing!